Fire, in its rawest form, is both a destroyer and a creator. Since the dawn of humanity, it has played an essential role in our survival, yet also become a source of profound fear and reverence. From the first spark that brought warmth and light to the ancient caves, to the infernos that razed entire villages, fire has been a double-edged sword, at once a tool of life and a harbinger of death. The fear of fire runs deep within the human psyche, ingrained through millennia of experience, survival, and the trauma of destruction. Early humans recognized fire's power to both sustain and annihilate. It was no mere force to be controlled. It was an elemental, almost mystical force. Ancient cultures understood that fire, much like the gods they worshipped, could bring life and also take it away in an instant. The rituals surrounding fire in these early societies were not just symbolic, they were survival mechanisms, steeped in reverence, fear, and even worship. In the cradle of civilization, fire was revered in many forms. The Egyptians, the Mesopotamians, and the Greeks all incorporated fire into their religious practices, using it in offerings to their gods. However, the fear of fire was also palpable. It wasn't just used to illuminate temples or homes, it was an essential part of their most feared and powerful rites. The ancient Egyptians, for example, used fire in their embalming process, symbolizing the burning away of earthly sin and allowing the soul to ascend. Yet, the mere act of lighting that fire, of controlling it for such a sacred purpose, was considered a divine act of great responsibility and power. But the rituals around fire were not solely celebratory or purifying. They were also deeply tied to the darker aspects of human experience. Sacrificial offerings were often set alight to appease gods or spirits. These rituals were often tied to death, representing the burning of the old to make way for the new, or to seal the fate of a soul destined for another realm. The ancient world saw fire not just as a source of light, but as a representation of mortality itself, reminder of the inevitable destruction that looms over every living being. The fear of fire is tied to the primal instinct to survive. Even as early humans mastered the flame, they feared its destructive potential. The very nature of fire, its ability to spread uncontrollably, was something that humans knew all too well. Early civilizations, living in wooden structures and surrounded by dense forests, faced the constant threat of wildfires. Whole villages could be destroyed in moments, and in those flames, people saw the destructive potential of the very force they depended on for warmth, cooking, and protection. Fire's destructive power was further solidified through myth and legend. From the fiery chariots of the gods in Greek mythology to the eternal flames in Zoroastrianism, fire was often associated with the divine, but also with wrath. The concept of hell, or a burning afterlife, has its roots in many of these ancient mythologies. For these civilizations, fire was more than a physical element. It was a spiritual force that carried both the power of life and death. It was feared not only for its ability to destroy, but for its ability to transform and cleanse, often leaving nothing in its wake except ashes and smoke, much like the souls of those who had succumbed to its wrath. The ancient Greeks, for instance, believed that the gods used fire to punish the wicked. Prometheus, the titan who defied Zeus to give fire to humanity, was eternally punished by being chained to a rock where an eagle would eat his liver every day, a punishment of endless torment that involved both fire and immortality. The Greeks' relationship with fire was a mixture of awe and fear, for they knew it had the power to both create and destroy in ways that were beyond their comprehension. As civilizations progressed, so did the fear of fire. It wasn't just the physical destruction that made fire so terrifying. It was its symbolic significance. Fire became a bridge between life and death, a tool for both creation and annihilation. The ancient rituals of fire began to take on even more complex meanings, often centered around death, the afterlife, and the unseen forces that guided human existence. It was in these rituals that the ultimate nightmare of fire became most pronounced, the fear of being consumed by a force that was both sacred and utterly destructive. The Romans, like their Greek predecessors, used fire in their most sacred rituals. But for them, it was also a means of invoking power over their enemies. The infamous fire of war was used in the sacred rituals of the Roman army. The flame was not merely a symbol of victory, but also a reminder of the toll war would take on the conquered and the conqueror alike. In the fiery sacrifices made to Mars, the god of war, the flame symbolized both victory and destruction, a duality that mirrored the conflict itself. But even in the more peaceful, religious settings, fire's dual nature was apparent. The Romans used fire as part of their funeral rites. The dead were often cremated, their bodies reduced to ash by the consuming flames. This act of purification through fire was seen as both an end and a transition. The dead were believed to be sent to the afterlife through the very flames that had consumed their physical forms. This was not merely a physical process, it was a spiritual passage, a rite of purification that transformed the body into the very essence of ash. However, this ritualistic use of fire also carried a deep sense of fear. The Romans feared the flames for their destructive capacity, but they also feared what the flames could signify in the afterlife. The belief in a fiery underworld, where souls were cast into the flames as punishment for their misdeeds, was prevalent in Roman culture. This concept of hell, rooted in ancient mythologies, painted fire as the ultimate source of torment and eternal punishment that transcended earthly suffering. In the Middle Ages, this fear of fire was further amplified with the rise of the Inquisition and the brutal punishment of heretics. The infamous auto da fe, or act of faith, was a public execution by burning, often carried out in front of a crowd. It was a terrifying ritual that served as both punishment and warning. Heretics and witches were burned at the stake, their bodies consumed by fire as a symbol of their damnation. The flames were believed to purify the soul of the sinner, yet the flames themselves were a manifestation of the wrath of God. It was a fearsome sight, an irrevocable end that could not be undone. But beyond the public executions and sacrifices, fire's presence in the lives of people during this period was also felt in more subtle ways. In medieval castles, the hearth was a central feature of daily life, providing warmth and food. Yet, even here, fire was never far from being a potential danger. Castles were made of wood, and the ever-present threat of fire was an ongoing concern. A single spark could mean the destruction of everything: homes, possessions, and lives. This constant threat imbued everyday life with a sense of anxiety. The hearth, which was meant to provide warmth and comfort, was also a reminder of the potential devastation fire could bring. The Renaissance saw a shift in how fire was perceived. The Enlightenment brought with it a more scientific understanding of fire, but it did not eliminate the deep-rooted fear of it. In fact, the development of gunpowder, cannons, and firearms only served to reinforce fire's destructive power in warfare. The fear of fire was no longer limited to the confines of religious rituals and executions. It had now become a symbol of the violence of war and the fragility of civilization itself. Even in the modern age, fire retains its fearsome reputation. It remains a symbol of destruction and fear in many cultures around the world. Wildfires, which ravage entire landscapes, serve as a reminder of the uncontrollable force of fire. In the face of natural disasters, fire continues to be both a destroyer and a creator, capable of both devastation and renewal. In urban environments, fire remains a constant threat. Building fires, whether accidental or deliberate, continue to haunt the human imagination as the fear of losing everything in the blaze never truly goes away. But fire also continues to have symbolic value. In modern rituals, Fire is used as a symbol of passion, energy, and transformation. The Olympic flame, for example, is lit to symbolize the beginning of the games, a beacon of hope, unity, and the human spirit. Yet even in this modern, sanitized form, fire remains a reminder of our deepest fears, the fear of being consumed, the fear of the unknown, and the fear of facing an uncontrollable force. What makes fire so powerful is not just its physical properties, but the way it has been woven into the fabric of human consciousness. It is both a tool and a weapon, a source of life and a destroyer of worlds. From ancient rituals to modern-day disasters, fire remains an ever-present force in our lives. It serves as a reminder of the fragility of human existence, the transitory nature of life, and the constant struggle to control the forces of nature. And so, as we look back on the ancient rituals of fear and the way fire has shaped our history, we realize that its legacy is far from over. Fire continues to be the ultimate nightmare, feared and revered, consuming everything in its path. It is both a symbol of human triumph and human vulnerability, a force that will forever remain an indelible part of our collective consciousness.